Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first episode in a six-part series entitled Simplify Your Workflows with Vendor Consolidation, a very hot topic. And in today's discussion, we will be evaluating the benefits of product suites versus point solutions and provide you with some practical guidelines on how to go about consolidating your IT vendors and the rewards that such an exercise will deliver. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm Bruce Dodworth, and I'm your host, and I'm delighted to be joined by Keith Bartlett, who is the founder of SASCOM, and Csaba Jerome, who is the Director of Solutions Consulting at Go2. Both of them you can see on the screen, and both of them are experts on vendor consolidation, as well as having interesting perspectives, points of view, and opinions about a myriad of other IT and business-related matters. So welcome, Keith and Csaba. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, starting with you, Keith, please.
Hi, thanks very much, Bruce. Keith Bartlett, working at SASCOM. I set the business up a couple of years ago now, really to act as an IT consultant within enterprises, basically helping them on their transition to procure and make the adoption, the best adoption they can, cloud IT services, which is obviously a big part of digital transformation journeys these days.
Good to see you, Keith. Thank you. Now you, Csaba.
Hello. Thank you for the invite. My name is Csaba Jerome. As you mentioned, I'm working in the solutions department of Go2, which is a software company. I've been working here for almost half my life, really, about 18 years and counting, starting as an individual contributor, helping businesses choose best technology as one of the vendor sales engineers, if you will, as the job title was called. But over the course of the years, I've tried to build a team of EMEA-based experts that help our customer base choose the best cloud IT solutions that fits their needs the best. So I'm here and worked with Keith as well for a number of years now, as making sure that we choose the right mix and the right solution, or consolidated solution, really, for our customer base. So I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you, Csaba. Okay, so should we crack on? I thought the first question should be a context question. So what are the drivers towards vendor consolidation? Why is it a thing? What's going on that's encouraging people to think about consolidating their vendors?
Well, I guess for a start, vendor consolidation's been around for an awful long time. But what I would say is, recent history, IT services, cloud IT services have become much more prevalent, much more complex. And subsequently, with that increase in IT services, vendor consolidation has become much more of a front and center thought process for businesses to think about. Obviously, it removes complexity and cost across an organization. So companies are always looking at rationalizing and thinking how they can do things simpler and better.
But there's still businesses that are inclined towards standalone, best-in-class point solutions still.
There are, of course. I guess if you look at it, lots of organizations look at those single point solutions as being best of breed, right? They deliver a use case that maybe a consolidated service doesn't. But on the flip side, almost everyone I talk to, you talk to them about the point solution that they've got in place, and they use a fifth of the functionality, a fifth of the feature set. So there's an awful lot of wasted sort of, pay.
Yeah.
The benefit cost relationship just isn't there.
Yeah. Chaba, what number of vendors are we talking about for an average SMB? How many? It sounds to me like there are more and more IT solutions being used by companies. Can you give us an idea of the kind of numbers of an average company, just so we can understand why they might be thinking about consolidating?
Well, I think I had a study where even one day, employees spend as much as 9% of their time switching between different solutions. And if you think about it, that's a significant amount of time. And often, depending on your job role, you would work with 20, 30 different solutions. And me as a solution consultant, I definitely have, I don't know how many shortcuts and desktops and applications just that I use on sort of a weekly, regular basis. The challenge we see here is that from a tool set perspective, it's getting complicated, and there is about 70, 80, maybe even up to 100 of these IT vendors that HSMBs are engaged with. And that's not just in individual job functions. Individual employees with their own job functions deal with 15, 20 of these. But as an organization, as an IT person, you would be looking at well over multiple dozens of these.
Yeah. Chaba, can you just give us an idea of the size of the challenge, please? So how many vendors is an average SMB got? What do we think? How many, approximately?
I would say from an average SMB perspective, the number of IT and solutions can reach over 50 quite easily. As an individual contributor, as an employee of these businesses, you are working with 10, 15 applications. A research by Harvard Business Review shows that an individual employee spends as much as 9% of their time, a digital worker, switching between applications. And at an organizational level, those marketing tools and IT support tools and engineering tools and logistic tools, they all add up to a good number of 50 plus IT solutions even in an SMB space.
Keith, have you got a perspective on the size of the challenge here, the size of the issue, please?
Yeah, I mean, when I've obviously researched quite a lot of this stuff for my customers, and always talking to them about consolidating some of the services that they use, because there's 9 times out of 10 overlap between some of the things that they've got, so you can get rid. The organizations I deal with, on average, they've got sort of 70 to 80 IT applications that they're procuring. And that's, I mean, that's grown exponentially over the last 10 years. I mean, I guess 10, 15 years ago, when I was a young whippersnapper in business, that would be down at finance would have 1 or 2, right? Now finance have got 10, 15 different applications that they use and integrate with through supply chain and, SAP and all the other applications they use. So there is a massive increase. And that's really what's driving the conversation, that if you can remove some of that from your organization, you're going to save a massive amount of people's time and cost out of business.
I read that 54% say they pay for features that they never use. 54%. It's quite an amazing statistic. I also read that during the pandemic, a lot of companies, as a sort of knee-jerk reaction, bought different IT, and now, a couple of years on or 18 months on, they're clearing house. So there was an aspect of taking on vendors then. Chaba, is that correct from your perspective? Is that one of the issues here?
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of these organizations were forced to fast track their cloud migration, to be honest with you. I've seen people just say, give me something tomorrow. There was a fable story. I had all kinds of customers during the COVID era approach us to say, I need digital, available SaaS-based solutions right now. What can you do for me? From digital businesses to even some crazy engagements like a yoga instructor who never worked with a computer before. They were in classroom type trainings, but they needed to digitize their business on a moment's notice. So absolutely, yes, I've seen that. A lot of those decisions 12, 18 months ago were quick fixes, and a lot of them were just get the job done right now. I don't care how much it costs. I don't care how much it's integrated into my ecosystem. But a lot of that we are seeing in the last, say, 6, maybe even 12 months ago, and definitely now, organizations are reevaluating their tech stack.
Okay. So you've given me a compelling reason why people should be doing it, why they should be thinking about it. But what are the benefits? Let's collect them together. What are the benefits? Presumably cost saving is a big benefit. Let's collect some benefits here.
So, cost saving, obvious, but also usability, right? So just thinking about an organization's workflow, how they interact with their customers, but also internally. If you think about instant messaging, many organizations use Teams, Slack, maybe a UCaaS product. So they've got 3 ways of using instant messaging. I know for a fact that loads of organizations I talk to, people internally miss instant messages from each other because they don't have that particular application open. So, we always generally decide what type of service we're going to use as an organization across the piece so that everyone uses it, no one misses anything.
So
it's a real challenge, but
so it's a decluttering. We're talking about sort of cleaning house, aren't we? Sorting out what we need, what we don't need, what we need, what we don't need, and also having therefore one bill, one point of contact within the company that we decide to consolidate with. Jabba, is there anything else that we can collect in our terms of benefits, please?
Well, quite often what happens is that if you have solutions from a single vendor, they look the same, they operate the same. So adoption, learning curve is reduced if you have single vendors. Keith mentioned, Teams. It's a Microsoft product. The logic around administration, the logic around end user use is supposedly the same. And it's the true with most of the consolidated vendor tools that they're trying to make sure consciously that not only the look and feel of the application, but also the infrastructure requirements of that application are kept unified. So you have to maintain less firewall rules, less exceptions, less security policies, and that's just improving your overall efficiency as a business.
Keith, anything else on your list? We've sort of talked about the benefit to the company, but what about the benefit to us as employees? What's the benefit to us of the company consolidating its vendor base?
Just the number of tools that you need to do your job. The choice at the moment, I've probably got 3 or 4 choices that I can use for telephony. I talk to numerous organizations around remote support, especially IT teams. And they've got 4, 5, 6 different applications that they can use to do certain things. You just don't need that. It completely overcomplicates how workflows are happening in organizations. So just from a user perspective, keep it simple, stupid is my motto.
And I just want to add that I love that because less is more, but also it needs to work anywhere where that user expects it. So I want to stress the sort of cloud versus on-prem or unified versus purpose-built solution difference, because we are not just tied to the workplace or the office anymore. So these kind of solutions, and often what comes with vendor consolidation comes with migration of the cloud. So making sure that these work anywhere that your employee base is primarily working at is going to be critical to the adoption. I'll probably get back to that a little bit later.
Yeah. Okay. So who's pushing hardest? Is it the vendors themselves that are looking to get you to consolidate, or is it the companies? So who's pushing hardest? Where's the drive coming from? Is it coming from the vendor, or is it coming from the company, or is it coming from both?
Both. Without a shadow of a doubt, both. I think that vendors are always trying to add new functionality features to their systems, right? Why wouldn't they? Subsequently, they're always pushing for wallet share in their existing accounts and win new accounts with different functionality, different features that maybe they didn't have previously. They're only doing that because they know that consolidating services is something that all companies are looking to do anyway, right? So there is a supply and demand aspect to it. But if you think about, I don't know, unified communications as an example, everyone now buys unified comms. Very few people would go out and buy a telephony solution, right? A standalone, pure, I can make a phone call solution. In fact, I don't really know of any vendors out there that just do that. But so unified communications is a case in point. It's a consolidated set of services that are wrapped up that everyone now just procures. And there are so many vendors that deliver that service. 10 years ago, you would have had to have bought each individual component separately. Now that's unthinkable.
I'm fully with Keith on this one, with the benefits of both sides. I think both sides of the coin will take their own home from this. I'm just taking the vendor side a little bit, because from a provider perspective, making sure that your share of wallet is bigger, that's one aspect, but also the customer retention elements. If more solutions, more critical services are provided by your organization, as in by our organization, to our customer base, the less likely that customer will churn. So there's an additional benefit of customer lifetime value. There is an additional benefit of providing as much service as is in your portfolio. But I also want to highlight one more thing here, is the danger of the one versus the few, because I've also seen some organizations who chose one provider, and typical, and Keith is smiling, I think, because I'm thinking about some organizations who chose to do only Microsoft services. If it doesn't exist in Microsoft's portfolio, it doesn't exist for them. And to me, that's a dangerous position. That's definitely putting all your eggs in one basket. Whereas vendor consolidation should be taken in a reasonable consideration, where you're reducing 70 plus service providers to a select dozen is desirable, but if you can actually overdo it as well.
Csaba, that's a really good point. So can we get to some examples? And Csaba, I'm going to ask you to kick off, because I was reading that sort of IT support, IT help desk is one of the areas that's most rich for consolidation, maybe going from 4 vendors down to 1. Can you give us an example from your recent past of one of your customers that's consolidated and the benefits that they may have got as a result of it, please?
IT service management, or ITSM, has probably about 10, 15 facets of functionality and areas, from incident management and ticketing to asset tracking to warranty management, remote support, remote monitoring and management that includes patching, security and endpoint protection, identity. All of those are collected as services from the IT, especially in SMB, where the IT owner is actually owning all of these as sort of a single person, often wearing many hats. And consolidating smartly some of these services can actually gain a lot of benefits. Specifically, I recently worked with a UK food chain where they benefited from combining the ticketing, the endpoint security, which is antivirus, the remote support, which is the ad hoc help to the employees when and where they have a problem, and remote management that allowed them to run their infrastructure, make sure all the patches are deployed, make sure they're alerted for any service outages, all under one. And that's just one small example of 4 distinct services delivered under one set. And that's just in the ITSM space.
And what
now pass it over to Keith, because I'm sure that he will have additional thoughts around the UCaaS side, because that has also implications.
Just before Keith answers, because I know our viewers are going to be interested. So collapsing 9 things or 4 things down to 1, there must, apart from the obvious benefits of just one tool, one thing to learn, one thing on your desktop, do you know what the cost saving was of that to the customer?
The cost saving really depends on how much they, it's not just about licensing. And that's, I wouldn't be giving you a percentage of a number because it was a very specific project. But one thing as guidance to our viewers, it's not just about not paying for licenses of other IT service vendors. It's also about making sure that you monetize all the services that you're using and all the dedicated workforce, perhaps, that was managing those different solutions. and the infrastructure costs of maintaining all of those. I've also had a study where in mid-sized organizations, there might be 1 or 2 full-sized employees just managing their vendor stack, dedicated job roles for application vendor manager. And those roles, obviously, if the more tools you have, the more of those roles you need. So the advice is, from an actual cost-saving benefit perspective, is don't just count the licenses that you're no longer paying, count the intangibles, which are actually quite significant as well.
I was going to mention actually a remote support customer that I've just won, and we were. It was actually almost a nirvana state, looking at what they currently had in play. But what they were looking for was a mobile device management product, and we managed to consolidate everything that Csaba just said, plus provide the mobile device management. And there was a tangible cost benefit. So I worked with them to create a business justification, because there would have been a retraining exercise. They had 8 admin IT support staff looking after about 1,500 staff globally. And, the cost saving there just on licenses alone was £20,000 a year. And then on top of that, we also enabled them to work from home, something Csaba mentioned earlier. The solutions that they had in place didn't actually afford them to work from home, right? They weren't comfortable and confident for doing that. So by providing, actually, it was a product from GoTo called GoTo Resolve, has all 5 different functionalities in it as a consolidated platform, and it was superb. Completely met their business justification, business case, and it's rolled out really well.
Your customers must be delighted, Keith. It almost sounds too good to be true, but I'm sure it is. So my next question is actually referring to the title of this webinar, which is around workflows. So how can vendor consolidation actually simplify workflows? I'm not quite sure I totally understand. And why is it important? So workflows as a result of vendor consolidation.
The first obvious thing that jumps out is, and I think I mentioned this before, is simply switching between apps. That's just a meticulous task. How many browser windows, how many tabs do you have to have open just to do your job in the morning? The next one is, and I'm going to go a little bit more into the nuance, but segmented data. As an organization, you're processing customer data, customer behavior information, chat logs, recordings, tickets, histories. A lot of this are tangible business intelligence source where your BI systems are supposed to pick it up and aid you with business decisions. If you're not in a consolidated state, then you're looking at 70 plus different databases that all have to talk to each other somehow, that all have to be analyzed in a unified manner. Consolidation actually helps with the disconnected silos of both the data as well as the processes. And it kind of sounds like a dream, and I get that, but it helps even if you have to only process 4 or 5 different silos of the data that you generate as business source and business intelligence, rather than 60 or 70. So switching apps and disconnected data would be the 2 points I could mention here.
I'd completely agree. I'll give you a recent example. Speaking to a Premier League football club at the moment. They've not signed up anything, but the use case there is incredible. They're agents that take in and sell tickets for both existing annual pass holders, right? Or just season ticket holders, but they don't have tickets. They're after more tickets. It's incredible that they actually have to go through 7 different applications to look at whether there's availability, space, what that looks like. By consolidating onto just one CCaaS platform, that goes down to 2. And it actually truncates that call from 15 minutes to a couple of minutes. Wow. So just think about that workflow. The customer experience is improved. The agent is happier because they're not flapping and getting muddled up and messed up like I just did, trying to think about things and what to do right and the right process, right flow. So all that is negated, just becomes much easier dealing with people.
Okay, so both
from
of
a
you.
CCAS. Sorry about that.
No, Chubba, you go.
Just wanted to add that to Keith's set from a CCAS perspective and the tickets and the Premier League, from a employee and agent perspective, the channels of communication can be a daunting task. Sometimes somebody sends a text message, then they send an email, then they send a social media post, then they call you. And systems that are not consolidating your CCAS channels, and they're not kind of giving that unified data view of that one customer, can really lead to a lot of frustration and a lot of reduced customer experience. As Keith was mentioning, I think it took like 7 different systems to comb together all the pieces to say, okay, what exactly is this person after when they're contacting us? Just wanted to highlight that it's not just about the tools consolidation, but also about the channel, especially in the CCAS space, that was helping some of these. And it, by nature, provides that unified silo of data, at least for that area of your business.
You've definitely convinced me that workflows are a benefit, and I can absolutely understand that now. Should we get into more practical terms for a moment, which is anybody who's watching this who thinks, yes, I need to consolidate, how do they go about it? So can we just spend a couple of minutes on the how? How should they go about it? What do they do first? What do they do second? What do they do third? Let's give our viewers some practical steps, please.
Very often what I see is that there is no awareness, because the marketing team has decided to adopt a marketing specific tool. The social media team is now doing a password manager. The IT team thinks everything's running fine on Teams. No, I'm bringing technical examples, but this is really going into step number 1 is awareness. Is making sure that as the IT owner, you need to evaluate your existing IT tool stack and really understand what's being used. Information is king. What's being used in your organization, and is that still delivering the original ROI and the original promise that it was bought for? And again, going back to the 80-20 rule, is it even used? So first step is that investigate that, and that's sort of the next step. Is once you know the silos and the aspects and the 70 apps that you're working with, then you should investigate how can you categorize these together into logical chunks, and then research the cloud vendors or vendors in general, hopefully using your IT solution consultant in the process, because it's a very daunting marketplace to do this on your own, but to investigate which one of those unified or consolidated vendors are targets for your functions and needs, and then evaluate and adopt those, also usually with some help, but making sure that you don't just buy on promises, but you are evaluating and making sure at least the initial benefits are realized with the vendor consolidation. So be sure that you work with the identified vendor candidates that are capable of proving out their messaging and their value. So 1, 2, 3 would be awareness, investigate, and evaluate and adopt.
Keith, does that make sense to you? Does that seem about right?
Yeah, I mean, it's what I do on a daily basis, Bruce. You know, customers come to me and they say, I'm looking for X because I've got a problem. And you look at it, and the first thing I ask is, well, why are you looking for X if you've got that problem? What have you currently got that can't deliver that problem? Or potentially, what have you currently got that may help with that problem? Again, lots of organizations don't know what they've got. And they don't know what they've got can actually do what it can do, right? Because they're only using a small part of it. So, you know, on a daily basis, I do exactly what Csab's just gone through. I look at what organizations use. We do a sort of an asset take on their software, on their IT services. We look at places and solutions that can be consolidated, right? Often it isn't the case. Often they might be using a point solution or a solution that does one or just 2 things that they need, and there isn't an opportunity to consolidate.
Good point.
Right? And you just leave it alone. It might be that it's relatively old but it's integrated with a manufacturing process. Well, you don't want to affect that, right? Because it's going to cause all sorts of problems. But I would certainly suggest, and I might have a vested interest in it, but do talk to an independent IT consultant, right? Someone that hasn't really got skin in the game. They're not a vendor.
Dependent.
They're also not a VAR, right? Not a channel partner that has got a very limited portfolio to sell. Because again, it'll be, I've got an answer for you. What's the question? It'll be the wrong way round. So go and get some advice, get some help, and there are many people out there that can do that on your behalf. I'm just one of those people.
Yeah, no, that sounds like it makes sense to me. Right, next question. What are the dangers? What are the consequences if it goes wrong and you've chosen a single vendor? Are there some dangers of putting all your eggs in one basket?
I kind of mentioned it earlier already, but definitely. Individual platforms from a business continuity perspective can be dangerous, because if one of your vendors go down, all of your business goes down. There is no plan B, there is no backup. And that can be quite damaging to both the reputation as well as the output of your business, especially if you're in manufacturing or in some other very time-oriented business. This can multiply. So the first thing is, instead of going on and deciding on just one egg on that basket, or one basket on all of those eggs, the one and only approach, you need to consider the good mix of differentiation at a reasonable level. So not 17, not 1, maybe 10, maybe 7, maybe 5, whatever fits your business the best.
Be realistic.
So be realistic. And Keith just mentioned that in some specific cases, point solutions simply cannot be replaced, because it's too much effort, it's too much risk, it's too much damage. If you try to do that, it's like a taxi driver. If their car sits in a service for a week, it's very different perception, because their business is now impacted, than an individual who might be able to just go and take another taxi to get to where they want to go. So the first thing is make sure that you have a healthy balance, and not just go too narrow, and make sure that you're thinking about business continuity. What if that promise, what if that vendor goes down? Do I have a plan B? And the next thing I would say from a risk perspective or a danger perspective is not to reevaluate them regularly. A lot of times we think a decision is made for life, but it never is. And in a way of consciously, regularly reviewing that tech stack, perhaps every 6 months, perhaps every year, whatever the cycle and the change resilience of your business is, constantly reviewing these is quite important. We have a danger of one and done type of approach. Okay, we've just done this, we are okay. But then, as we know with COVID, as we know with the other macroeconomic factors, the world is changing a lot faster than this annual planning cycle. So you need to make sure that it sets appropriately.
I'm thinking as well, it's slightly off the topic of this particular webinar, but if people are listening and thinking, what criteria should I use for selecting an IT solution vendor? What is on our checklist? Are they a well-known established brand? Is it the service and support? What might it be that should be on our checklist when we're looking at IT vendors? Can we just quickly deal with that, please?
Yeah, certainly. I definitely think brand is important, right? You don't want to go complete cutting edge, but I know several of my customers, they take every Friday as an example, or at least a day a week, but they use Fridays to talk to new vendors, right? People are out there that are coming up with pretty new, innovative concepts, ideas, services. I think that's fantastic. It's very refreshing. On the flip side, I talk to CIOs and IT directors that are so busy, they're bombarded by vendors trying to sell them things and channel partners trying to sell them things, that they really bury their head in the sand. So there needs to be a sort of middle ground, how to continue to evaluate. I think, what Csaba just said about the dangers of going down, just one brand's, even if it's a well-respected brand's route. One of the biggest issues there is not just downtime, but it's cost. It's what the likes of the Microsofts and the Googles want you to do. They want you to go down that road. And then what happens once they've got you, they'll increase their prices by 10, 15%, which has just happened this year. Lots of my customers are now, trying to redo the decisions that they made last year by consolidating too much, right? So yeah, I think the evaluations are critical. You have to do that. I think using an organization as an example like GoTo, fantastic. They're not the biggest organization in the world. They're not Microsoft or Google, but they're a very, very well respected long-term brand that delivers phenomenal product.
Csaba, any other comments to make about our checklist of which IT vendors? What should you look for in an IT vendor, please?
I think for the first and foremost, most important part is to match your own organizational requirements, or to be aware of them, to the solution that you're choosing. And this is often a mistake when evaluations in organizations are started. It kind of becomes a dream list. People put completely unreasonable and unnecessary functionalities in their requirements checklist just because they believe it's going to change the world. But in reality, again, going back to Pareto 80-20, we will not ever use a functionality like that, practically speaking. So matching the actual scrutinized list of your needs with the capabilities of the product that you are looking at is, I think, the most important checklist item. Yep. And then covering off the basis of security, because with cloud and with all the kind of work from anywhere comes a challenge of making sure you secure your environment when you don't know where users are physically anymore. And reliability are definitely checklist items for cloud services. Yeah. Functionality, security, reliability. I think these were the three categories that I would look at, and I very often see from our RFQs, RFPs, from our customer needs.
Okay, my second to last question. Neither of you have mentioned... Sorry, Keith, go for it, Keith.
Sorry, Bruce. Yeah, what I was also just going to say, one other really important piece, maybe we missed off, is roadmap. It's all good and well looking at your requirements, your functionality set today. Always ask about the future roadmap, what that organization is going to be delivering in 6-12 months' time.
Good point.
Loads of vendors don't give that information out, but if you don't ask, you don't receive the answers. And that may help you to consolidate further, with that decision that you're going to make anyway. Yep. So it's another good point to think about.
My last question, and then we're going to wrap it up. So just one last piece of advice. So thinking about our topic for today, one last piece of advice? You go first, Keith, then we'll finish with Csaba. What advice would you give to our viewers?
Yeah, so, loads of organizations rely on organizations like Gartner, right, to get valued insight around vendor landscapes. My piece of advice would be to go and find two very trustful, independent IT consultants that you can bounce ideas off, leverage their knowledge, their awareness of the market. Generally the information that they provide, the conversations are all free of charge, don't cost you any money. But again, 9 times out of 10, people like me have been in this IT industry for 20, 30 years. So we're a sort of font of knowledge, and great to get input, and especially valued input from.
So it's a very good way of sort of short-circuiting the process and basically leapfrogging and making it a much quicker process as well.
Exactly.
Csaba?
Speaking of quick, my advice would be don't overanalyze. One of the areas that I've seen all too often is the risk of change and really delayed or no decision. And specifically with vendor consolidation, specifically with the review of your IT stack, you will need to move sooner rather than later. So while you do take all the precautions, you do a reasonable amount of research, you rely on your IT consultant, like Keith said, but at some day you will have to pull the plug and make sure that you make that change, because if you don't, then it's just going to get worse.
Yeah, good advice. Don't let there be analysis paralysis. Make some changes, and that's the best place to start by the sound of it. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody, for attending today's session, and a huge thank you to Keith and Csaba for their insight, their expertise, their stories, their examples, their experiences. It was incredibly valuable. I think you've inspired us all to certainly go away and look at the number of IT vendors that we have, and certainly to consider consolidating them. So thank you very much. Please don't forget to register for the next episode, the second episode, which is Simplifying RMM, which is Remote Monitoring and Management, Optimized Remote Working. That's the title of episode 2. And you can register for it you'll see in the little bar alongside, you can actually register for that straight away. Thank you again for your time. Thank you again to our panel, Keith and Csaba, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon. Have a good rest of the day. Take care.
Thank you. Goodbye.